Up on Capitol Hill, several lawmakers now openly questioning just how accurate the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, was when he testified before Congress. Their concerns following a former Trump campaign advisor's guilty plea on Monday in the Russia investigation, detailing campaign officials discussing meetings with Russians, something Sessions said under oath, quote, never happened. He's speaking live at a veterans event here in Washington right now. We're monitoring that, but I want to quickly go to CNN's Manu Raju. He's up on Capitol Hill with the breaking news. Manu, what are lawmakers telling you?
Well, Wolf, Democrats are raising sharp concerns, and Republicans say they want to look into this matter further. Now, this started on Monday, and after court papers were unsealed that showed that George Papadopoulos, that foreign policy advisor, had actually floated a meeting between President Putin of Russia and then candidate Donald Trump. Now, at that meeting, Trump did not dismiss the idea, but Jeff Sessions, who was then the senator and a top surrogate for the campaign, weighed in, and he said that's a bad idea. He rejected it. This is according to a source in the room who tells us that's exactly what happened. Now, this is prompting a lot of questions on Capitol Hill because, as you can recall, Wolf, under sworn testimony on multiple occasions over the past year, Sessions, now the Attorney General, was asked multiple times about his conversations with Russians, if he overheard any conversations with Russia, about Russian meetings and the like during the campaign. He either did not recall or rejected that. He said things like this earlier this year.
I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. Further, I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign. Well, let me just say this without hesitation, that I conducted no improper discussions with Russians at any time regarding a campaign or any other item facing this country.
And this happened repeatedly during his hearings earlier this year, even when Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina Republican, asked him about whether or not he heard any conversations occurring about Russia meetings. He said, I've not seen anything to indicate collusion with the campaign. Now, Democrats in particular are very angry. They've now are saying that he should amend his testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee and Senate Judiciary Committee. Here's what they said.
Jeff Sessions concealed his meetings with Russians, and he had an obligation to be more forthcoming about the meetings that involved Papadopoulos as well. And in fact, one of the points of question is whether Papadopoulos, in that charging document, where there's a reference to a campaign supervisor, was in fact talking to Jeff Sessions.
I was very troubled by the Attorney General's comments overall.
What kind of concerns do you have?
About whether he is being honest and forthright with the committee, and what does that mean for the highest law enforcement officer in the country?
Now, Wolf, I just talked to the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, the Republican of Iowa, and I asked him if he shared these concerns. He said he's still learning the details, but he said, I'm going to look into it. And also the number 2 Republican in the Senate, John Cornyn, who sits on those 2 key committees, said it's certainly a legitimate area to explore, something that he's trying to learn more details on, too, Wolf.
All right, Manu, thanks very much. Manu Raju up on Capitol Hill. Let's bring back our panel, Carrie Cordero, Ken Cuccinelli, and Gloria Borger. So what could this renewed scrutiny of the Attorney General lead to potentially?
Well, he may have to amend his testimony. You know, maybe they're going to call him back. I think the big issue here is George Papadopoulos, and nobody knew that he was going to be raised in this. Jeff Sessions could conceivably say, as have many people in the campaign, who is this guy?
Right.
I didn't know who he is. And yeah, I was in a meeting with him, and yeah, now it was raised that should Trump have a meeting with Putin, and according to our reporting at CNN, Jeff Sessions was the one who shut that down and said, no, candidate Trump is not going to have a meeting with Putin. So members of Congress have a right to say, well, we didn't get the whole picture. But Jeff Sessions will probably say, if I had to guess, I didn't know who this guy was. And as soon as it was raised in that meeting, in which other things were also raised for foreign policy, I shut that suggestion
Should he at
down.
least now go back to the committees, the Attorney General, and say, yes, I was at that meeting with the President. George Papadopoulos was at that meeting as well. The issue of Russia came up. We had a brief discussion about it. I didn't think it was a smart idea for the President to go to Moscow to meet with Putin. I should have probably told you about that during the Q&A, but I didn't.
I mean, the way it sounds at this point is that a discussion was sort of proposed and he shut it down. So his perspective may very well be there wasn't a discussion. There was nothing to discuss. We said we're not going down that path and we didn't talk about it any further. Now, does that mean you talked about it? Yeah, arguably you could say yes. And so in that sense, he may feel the need to amend, but I doubt he remembers much. This is a guy who just showed up in March. Nobody really knows why he was there. That hasn't been explained.
You're talking about Papadopoulos.
I'm talking about Papadopoulos. So if you're the senator from Alabama and you're leading the national security team, which was very thrown together, you know, really to show there was something together, you know, you're not taking this very seriously.
Let me let Carrie
a little bit with that argument is Jeff Sessions was the ostensible head of the National Security Advisory Group. And even if he did, and if we take him at his word that he shut down the particular proposal at that meeting, the plea agreement that Papadopoulos reached indicates that after that meeting, for at least a couple months, Papadopoulos was emailing other senior campaign advisors about setting up meetings with Russian government-related officials.
Right.
And so if Sessions was the head of that committee and he didn't like what was being proposed at that meeting, then he should have either said, afterwards, what is this guy doing on this team? What's he talking about? I don't want any more of this. There should not have been a couple more months of activity, at least that we know of, as evidence in that plea agreement of potential meetings being set up and communications that this guy was having, Papadopoulos was having with these Russian contacts.
Yeah, but all we know from what's been publicly released is the one way. This looked like a pie in the sky thing. The guy said, I'm going to set up this meeting between Trump and the president of Russia.